I never thought a judge could just take away something that's mine. My land, my family's land. And yet one morning, that's exactly what happened. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't because I did something wrong. One man, sitting in a courtroom, decided with a single sentence, "This property no longer belongs to you." I remember standing there in the back of that courtroom, listening to those words. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for a moment I couldn't even breathe. Everything I had grown up with, all the memories tied to that land, felt like they had been ripped away from me. This land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was my grandmother planting flowers every spring, my father teaching me to drive the tractor, late nights staring at the stars from our porch. Every inch of it had history. Every corner had a story. And now, it was gone. I walked out of that courtroom and everything felt unreal. People were chatting, laughing, going about their normal lives. Cars drove by, kids ran to school, and I felt like I had been erased from the world I knew. For a while, I wanted to give up, to just leave town and pretend it never happened. But deep inside, something inside me refused. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. "You fight for what's yours. Always. No one else will." That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at old family photos and deeds. My grandmother's handwriting on those yellowed papers was strong, confident, filled with pride. She had built this land, nurtured it, protected it, and now someone had just taken it like it didn't matter. I poured myself a cup of tea and tried to calm down, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Angry at the judge, angry at the person who took it, angry at the system that allowed this to happen. And then I remembered something my grandmother had always told me. When you feel powerless, don't lash out blindly. Think, plan. You'll always find a way. Those words lit a spark in me. I realized I wasn't going to be erased. Not by a judge, not by anyone. The next morning, I drove past the land. Even though it was no longer legally mine, it still felt like home. The morning sun cast golden, light across the fields. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. I took a deep breath, and for a moment, I felt a strange calm. Then I saw him, the man who now claimed the land. He was walking along the fence, looking smug, like he had already won. He didn't know me. He didn't know what I was capable of. I stayed in my car, watching him. I didn't shout. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I remembered my grandmother's advice: think, plan, act. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you lose control. And that's when I began to plan. Over the next few days, I poured through every piece of paper I could find. Old deeds, survey, maps, receipts, anything that had my family's name on it. And slowly, I started to see cracks. Things the lawyers had missed. Signatures that didn't match. Dates that didn't add up. Tiny mistakes that could turn the whole case around. I also started talking to neighbors who remembered the land when it was fully ours. Their stories added layers to the truth, things that the court never heard. Pieces of history, of family legacy, that no one could take away. Evenings were spent sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by piles of papers and notebooks, planning my next steps. My cat would curl up beside me, purring softly, as if she understood the mission I had taken on. And every night, I kept replaying that moment in court. That flat, cold voice delivering my loss like it was nothing. I allowed myself a moment to feel hurt, to feel angry, but only for a moment. Then I pushed it aside and focused on what I could do next. Because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. About proving that a woman could stand her ground, fight back, and reclaim what was hers. I started contacting old friends who knew about the land and the history of our family. Slowly, a team of supporters emerged. People who believed in fairness, people who understood the importance of this land. They didn't just see property, they saw legacy. And that gave me hope. One night, I drove past the property again. The new owner was there with workers, clearing the land. The barn my grandmother had built was threatened, fences were being pulled down, and the soil she had nurtured for decades was being turned over like it was nothing. I wanted to rush out, to scream, to stop them with my own hands. But I didn't. I took a deep breath and remembered, fight smart. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, notes, even conversations I had overheard that hinted at shady dealings during the court case. Every piece of evidence mattered. And then I found it. Something I didn't expect. A clue that could change everything. A discrepancy in the documents, a signature that didn't match, proof that someone had manipulated the process. This wasn't just about losing land anymore. This was about uncovering the truth. I felt a surge of excitement mixed with fear. But I knew I had to act carefully. One wrong move and they could try to silence me again. So I made a plan. Slow, careful, calculated. Every step designed to expose the truth without giving them a chance to stop me. I even reached out to a journalist friend, someone I trusted, to look over the evidence. Her eyes widened when she saw it. "This isn't just your story," she said. "This could be huge." And she was right. This story wasn't just mine anymore. It was about fairness, about legacy, about standing up to a system that thought it could silence a determined woman. For the next few weeks, my days and nights blurred. Planning, researching, documenting. Every moment was consumed by the mission I had set for myself, and through it all, the new owner walked around with a smug smile, thinking he had won forever. Little did he know. The storm was just beginning. The first time I decided to fight back, I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. My hands shook as I typed out the email to my lawyer, attaching the photos and documents I had found. I worried he'd laugh at me, or worse, tell me I was wasting my time. But when he called me the next morning, his voice was serious. "Where did you find this?" he asked. I could almost hear the excitement hidden under his calm tone. I told him about the late nights, the piles of papers, the neighbors' stories. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You might be onto something. This isn't over." Those words felt like oxygen in my lungs. For the first time since the judge's decision, I felt hope. Real hope. But hope is a dangerous thing because it makes you vulnerable. It makes you imagine victory, even when the road ahead is dark and twisted. The next days were a blur of activity. My lawyer and I met over coffee, spreading out the documents on a small wooden table in the corner of the cafe. He pointed at the mismatched signatures, the strange dates, the missing witness statements. "If this is real," he said, "then someone played dirty. And if they played dirty, we can expose them." I leaned in, whispering like someone might be listening. "But what if they come after me again? What if they try to silence me?" He looked me straight in the eye. "Then you fight harder." Those words stayed with me. Fight harder. But fighting harder doesn't just mean more paperwork. It means more courage. And courage doesn't come easy, especially when you feel like the whole system is against you. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a mistake. What if I lost again? What if I ruined my family's name? What if this fight destroyed me? But then I'd think about my grandmother's hands, weathered from years of working that soil, about her laughter echoing across the fields, about the nights we sat on the porch, talking about dreams and futures. And I'd whisper to myself, this is for her. One afternoon, I went back to the property. I parked far enough away that no one would notice me, and I walked quietly to the edge of the field. The new owner was there again, shouting at his workers, giving orders like he was the king of the land. I watched him for a while, my fists clenched at my sides. He had no idea what this land meant. To him, it was just dirt, a chance to make money, maybe build something flashy. To me, it was roots, family, identity. I pulled out my phone and started recording. His voice, his commands, the way he talked, about tearing down the barn. It all went into my files. Evidence. Not just of his arrogance, but of his disrespect. Later, I sat in my car, watching the video playback. My blood boiled, but I also felt stronger. Every clip, every photo, every note was another brick in the wall I was building. A wall of truth. Days turned into weeks, and soon I wasn't alone anymore. Neighbors who had once stayed silent began to speak up. Old friends sent me messages, offering their support. Some even shared stories of how my grandmother had helped them, lending tools, giving food, offering shelter during storms. The land wasn't just ours. It had touched so many lives. And slowly, people started to realize, this fight wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. One evening, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was shaky. "Honey," she said, "you need to be careful. He's been asking around about you." I froze. "What do you mean?" "He's angry. He knows you're digging. People are saying he might try to scare you off." For a moment, fear gripped me like ice. But then I remembered what my lawyer said. Fight harder. I took a deep breath and told my mom, let him try. I'm not afraid anymore. The truth was, I was afraid. But I had learned something powerful. Courage doesn't mean you don't feel fear. Courage means you act anyway, even when your knees are shaking. A few days later, I received an anonymous letter in the mail. No return address, no name. Just a piece of paper with one line. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. My hands trembled as I read it. My heart pounded, but instead of throwing it away, I pinned it to my board, right next to the deeds and the photos. It became part of my evidence, proof that someone was scared of what I might find. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the letter. And then, almost without realizing it, I started to smile. Because fear like this, threats like this, only happen when you're getting close to the truth. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. "We need to move faster," I told him. We scheduled meetings, filed requests for records, pulled out every document we could get our hands on. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And the picture it revealed was ugly. Corruption, lies, and a scheme bigger than I had imagined. This wasn't just about one man stealing my land. It was about power, about people who thought they could bend the rules because no one would challenge them. But they hadn't counted on me. And they definitely hadn't counted on a woman who had nothing left to lose. One night, I stood on the porch of my house, looking out at the dark fields in the distance. The moonlight glowed softly, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine. I whispered into the night, almost like I was speaking to my grandmother. "I won't let them win. I promise you." And as the stars shimmered above me, I knew the fight was far from over. But I also knew one thing. The judge may have taken my land, but he would never take my spirit. And soon, the world would know the truth. The first time I walked into the county records office, I felt like an outsider. The walls were lined with dusty shelves and old filing cabinets. The air smelled like paper and ink, mixed with the faint scent of coffee from a pot that must have been sitting there for hours. Behind the counter sat a clerk, a woman in her 60s with sharp glasses and a look that told me she had seen it all. She raised an eyebrow as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked flatly. I smiled politely. "Yes, I'm looking for property records tied to my family's land. I need to see deeds, surveys, anything from the last 50 years. Her eyes narrowed. "That's a lot of paperwork. What's this about?" I hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. "The judge took away my land, but I believe something's wrong. I'm looking for proof." She studied me, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first person to walk in here saying that, but usually people don't come back after they see how complicated it gets." I straightened my shoulders. "Well, I'm not like most people." For a moment, she held my gaze. Then, slowly, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "I'll see what I can do." She disappeared into the back, and I sat on a wooden bench, my heart pounding. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, she returned, her arms full of old folders and boxes. "Here's a start," she said. "But be careful, honey. Once you dig deep enough, you might find things you don't want to know." Her warning echoed in my ears as I flipped open the first folder. Page after page, I studied deeds, survey maps, contracts. Some were handwritten, others typed on yellowing paper. And then I saw it. A document from the 1980s with a signature that didn't match. My grandmother's name, written in shaky, uneven letters. Except my grandmother never signed her name like that. I knew her handwriting like I knew my own. I snapped a photo with my phone and kept digging. The deeper I went, the more strange details I uncovered. Land transfers that didn't make sense. Missing witness signatures. Even a deed that was dated. On a Sunday, when the office wasn't even open. My heart raced. This wasn't just sloppy work. This was intentional. By the time I left that office, I had a folder full of copies and a phone full of photos. Evidence. Proof. The kind that could bring the whole case crashing down. As I walked out, the clerk called after me. "Be careful, sweetheart. People don't like it when you shine a light on their shadows." Her words sent a chill down my spine. That night, I spread the papers across my kitchen table. My cat jumped up, pawing at one of the maps as if she wanted to be part of the fight too. I traced the lines of the property boundaries with my finger, thinking about all the years this land had been ours. And then I saw it. A tiny note in the margin of one map, barely visible. It was a reference to a boundary marker that had never been mentioned in court. If that marker was real, it could prove the land had been measured wrong. And if the land had been measured wrong, the whole ruling could be overturned. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer. "I think I found something big," I whispered, my voice trembling with excitement. The next morning, we drove out together to the edge of the property. We searched through weeds and brush, our boots crunching on fallen leaves, until finally, there it was, a rusted old marker stone, half buried in the dirt. I knelt down, brushing away the soil with my hands, my heart pounding in my chest. "This is it," I said softly. "This changes everything." My lawyer nodded, snapping photos and taking notes. This isn't just evidence. This is the kind of thing judges can't ignore. For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of hope so strong it almost brought me to tears. But hope, I was learning, always came with a shadow. That evening, as I drove home, a truck appeared in my rearview mirror. It followed me for miles. Every turn I took, every stop I made. The headlights stayed close, almost too close. My stomach tightened, fear creeping up my spine. Finally, I pulled into a gas station, hoping the truck would pass. Instead, it pulled in right behind me. I got out, forcing myself to stay calm. The driver didn't move, just sat there, engine running, lights on. I filled my tank, my hands shaking, then got back into my car and drove away. The truck followed for another mile before finally turning off onto a side road. When I got home, I locked every door and window, my heart still racing. I knew what this meant. They were watching me. They knew I was close. But instead of scaring me off, it only fueled my determination. If they were afraid, that meant I was winning. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late nights studying documents. My lawyer and I built our case piece by piece, brick by brick. Neighbors gave statements, old friends shared stories, and slowly, the truth began to take shape. But the man who had taken my land wasn't giving up easily. Rumors started spreading in town. People whispered that I was crazy, that I was making things up, that I was obsessed. At first, it hurt. It hurt to know that people I'd grown up with were doubting me. But then I realized that's what people do when they're afraid of the truth. They try to silence it with lies. One evening, I stood outside the barn on my family's land. The new owner was there, yelling at workers, telling them to tear down the roof. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything. His words, his anger, his disrespect. I knew that one day, this footage would be evidence too. And as I stood there, hidden in the shadows, I whispered to myself, "You can take the land. You can try to scare me, but you'll never break me." Because I had something he would never understand. Roots. And roots run deeper than greed. The fight was far from over. But with every step, every piece of evidence, every sleepless night, I was getting closer to the truth. And soon, everyone would see it. The court date was set. Just 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to gather every shred of evidence, 2 weeks to prove that I wasn't crazy, that my family's land had been stolen. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. My lawyer and I worked around the clock. We organized files, cross-checked dates, and highlighted every inconsistency we could find. The stack of binders on my kitchen table grew taller each day, until it looked like a wall between me and the rest of my life. But I didn't mind. That wall was my weapon. One evening, as I flipped through another set of documents, I found a letter tucked inside an old folder. It was written by my grandfather, years ago, to a local surveyor. His words were careful, deliberate, and clear. He described the land boundaries exactly as they should have been. He even included a hand-drawn map. My hands trembled as I read it. This was the missing piece. The judge couldn't deny a first-hand account from the very man who built the farm. I placed the letter gently on the table, like it was made of glass. "Grandpa," I whispered, "you're still fighting for us." That night, I dreamed of him. In the dream, he was walking beside me in the fields, his hand on my shoulder, telling me not to give up. When I woke, tears streamed down my face, but I felt stronger than ever. The days passed quickly, and with each day, the pressure grew. Strange things started happening. My mailbox was pried open, letters scattered on the ground. My car tires were slashed one morning, leaving me stranded, until a neighbor helped. And once, late at night, I heard footsteps outside my window. But when I looked, no one was there. Fear tried to creep in, but I refused to let it. I kept repeating one thing to myself. Fear means they're desperate, and desperation means they're losing. Finally, the morning of the hearing arrived. I put on my best suit, black, sharp, professional. My lawyer met me outside the courthouse, his briefcase full of evidence. "Are you ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. More than ready. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. The man who had taken my land sat at the opposite table, his smug smile barely hiding his nerves. His lawyer shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. My heart pounded, but I stood tall. The hearing began. Their side spoke first, presenting their version of the story. It was the same tired lies, the same twisted logic. They tried to paint me as emotional, unstable, even reckless. I clenched my fists under the table but forced myself to stay calm. Then it was our turn. My lawyer started with the documents, the mismatched signatures, the missing dates, the boundary marker. He laid it all out, piece by piece, like building a puzzle in front of the judge's eyes. And then came the letter. When my lawyer handed it to the judge, the room seemed to pause. The judge adjusted his glasses and read slowly. I watched his expression change, first curiosity, then surprise, then something else, something like doubt. This letter, my lawyer said firmly, proves beyond question that the original boundaries were altered, and this alteration led directly to the wrongful transfer of land. The opposing lawyer tried to object, but his voice cracked. He looked flustered, unprepared. The judge silenced him with a single wave of his hand. For the first time, I felt the weight shift. The power was moving, but it wasn't over yet. When the opposing side called witnesses, one of them was a man I'd known for years, a neighbor who used to help my grandfather. I expected him to tell the truth, but instead, he lied. He claimed he remembered my grandfather agreeing to sell a portion of the land decades ago. My jaw dropped. I wanted to shout, to call him out, but my lawyer squeezed my arm. "Stay calm," he whispered. So I sat there, seething inside, while a man I once trusted twisted the past. When it was our turn to cross-examine, my lawyer asked one simple question. "Sir, do you recall what day of the week this supposed agreement took place?" The man hesitated. I think it was a Sunday." My lawyer smiled faintly. "You're sure?" "Yes," the man said, nodding. The courtroom fell silent. My lawyer turned to the judge. "Your Honor, county offices are closed on Sundays. No legal agreement could have been signed on that day." The neighbor's face turned pale. He stammered, tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. His credibility collapsed in an instant. I almost laughed out loud from relief. Justice, I thought, has a funny way of showing up. As the hearing stretched into the afternoon, more cracks appeared in their story, more lies unraveled, and slowly I saw the smug look fade from the man's face across the room. But just when I thought we had won, something happened that shook me. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands. His voice was calm but stern. "I will need more time to review this evidence. My decision will not be made today." My stomach dropped. After everything, after all the proof, we still had to wait. The hearing ended and we filed out into the hallway. My lawyer tried to reassure me. "This is good. The judge is taking it seriously. That's what we want." But all I could think about was the uncertainty. Another stretch of sleepless nights, of waiting, of wondering if the truth would be enough. As I walked down the courthouse steps, I felt dozens of eyes on me. Supporters, doubters, strangers who had followed the case. Whispers floated through the air, but I blocked them out. Because I knew one thing for sure, no matter what the judge decided, I wasn't done fighting. This was bigger than me now, bigger than one piece of land. This was about justice, about standing up when the system tries to knock you down. And deep in my heart, I knew this story wasn't over yet. The waiting was torture. Every day felt like a month. Every hour dragged by, heavy with questions I couldn't answer. Would the judge side with me? Would he dismiss all the evidence? Would justice finally be mine, or would it slip away again? At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock. Some nights I cried quietly into my pillow, the weight of it all crushing me. Other nights I clenched my fists and whispered to myself, "Don't give up. Don't let them win." But even as I tried to stay strong, the pressure kept building. People in town started avoiding me in the grocery store, like I was trouble. Friends I'd known my whole life stopped calling. Some said I was obsessed, chasing something I could never win. And yet deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away. My family's land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was our history, our roots, the place where my grandfather planted his first crops, where my father taught me how to ride a horse, where I buried my first dog under the oak tree. This wasn't just about land. It was about identity. One evening, I drove out to the property. I parked on the side of the road and just sat there, staring at the fields. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For a moment, I imagined life as it used to be. Kids running through the grass, the smell of fresh hay, the sound of laughter echoing through the barn. But reality was different now. The land was scarred. Fences torn down, barns half collapsed, workers tearing apart what generations before me had built with their hands. I felt anger boil inside me. I pulled out my phone and recorded what I saw, my voice steady but fierce. This is what happens when greed wins. But I won't let it stay this way. This land will be ours again. The next day, I met with my lawyer. He had news. The judge has asked for a follow-up hearing, he said. That's rare. It means he's seriously considering everything we showed him. Hope flickered in my chest. So we have a chance? He nodded. We have more than a chance. We have momentum. That word, momentum, stuck with me. For so long, it had felt like I was pushing against a wall that wouldn't budge. But now, maybe, just maybe, the wall was starting to crack. As the second hearing approached, I doubled down. I reviewed every document again, memorized every detail, prepared myself for every trick the other side might throw at us. And then, something unexpected happened. A man showed up at my door one evening. He was old, with gray hair and a cane. He introduced himself as a retired county worker. I heard about your case, he said softly. And I thought you should know. I saw things back then. Things that weren't right. I invited him in, my heart racing. Over tea, he told me stories about shady deals, backroom agreements, and how land transfers were often manipulated for the benefit of the wealthy. Your family wasn't the only one, he said, but yours was one of the worst. I asked if he'd be willing to testify. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'm old. I don't have much to lose anymore, and the truth deserves to be heard. Tears filled my eyes. It felt like the universe was finally sending me an ally, someone who could tip the scales. The morning of the second hearing, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. Reporters filled the benches, their cameras flashing. This case had become more than just a local dispute. People wanted to see if justice could actually stand up against power. As I walked in, I held my head high, even though my knees shook. The man who had taken my land sat at the front, looking less confident this time. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. The hearing began. This time, we came in strong. We presented the retired county worker's testimony, his calm voice, breaking years of silence. He described how records were altered, how signatures were forged, how people like my family were pushed aside. The courtroom was silent, every word landing like a hammer. When he finished, he looked at me and gave a small nod. I wanted to hug him right there, but instead I mouthed, "Thank you." The other side scrambled to respond. Their lawyer tried to discredit him, saying his memory couldn't be trusted, but the damage was done. The truth had been spoken. I watched the judge closely. His face gave little away, but I could see him taking notes, considering every detail. As the hearing came to a close, I realized something powerful. No matter what the final ruling would be, I had already won in a way. I had exposed the lies. I had forced the truth into the light. And I had shown everyone watching that you don't just roll over when the system tries to crush you. Still, deep down, I hoped with all my heart that the judge would see it too. That night, I stood outside, on my porch staring up at the stars. I thought about my grandparents, about the generations before me who had walked that same land, who had sacrificed and fought to keep it alive. And I whispered into the night sky, I won't let you down. Whatever it takes, I'll finish this fight. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time I felt like the ending could finally be within reach. The day of the ruling finally came. My stomach twisted into knots as I walked into the courthouse. The hallways smelled faintly of old wood and paper, and every step echoed louder than it should have. People turned to look at me, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. I held my head high, even though my heart was pounding. The judge entered, his black robe swaying as he moved to his seat. The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I folded my hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. Psyche. Judge spoke slowly, his voice deep and deliberate. After reviewing all evidence, witness statements, and documentation, this court has reached a decision. My breath caught in my throat. He paused, flipping through his papers. It felt like the world was holding its breath with me. Finally, he looked up. The court finds that the transfer of property from the Thompson family was conducted improperly and unlawfully. Therefore, ownership of the land will be restored. For a moment, I couldn't believe it. My ears rang. Did he really say what I thought he said? My lawyer gripped my arm and whispered, You won. I did. I actually won. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. All the pain, all the waiting, all the nights I doubted myself, it had all led to this moment. People in the courtroom began to murmur, some clapping quietly. The man who had taken my land slammed his hand on the table and stormed out, his lawyer chasing after him. But I didn't care about him anymore. I had my land back. My family's name was cleared. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward me, shoving microphones into my face. How does it Feel to win against all odds? One asked. Another shouted, What's next for you and your family land? I wiped my tears, trying to steady my voice. This isn't just about me, I said. This is about every family who's been told they don't matter, who's been pushed aside by greed and power. Today proves that you can fight back, and you can win. My words echoed louder than I expected. Cameras flashed, people nodded, and for the first time in a long time I felt proud, not just of the victory, but of myself. Later that evening, I drove out to the land. The sun was setting again, the same way it had when I sat there in my car weeks before. But this time, it was different. This time, it was mine again. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly through the field. The grass brushed against my hands, and the cool air filled my lungs. I closed my eyes and imagined my grandfather's laughter, my father's voice teaching me how to hold the reins, my younger self running barefoot through the dirt. It was like they were all here with me, welcoming me home. My dog ran ahead, wagging his tail, chasing shadows in the twilight. I smiled through tears. The land felt alive again, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. Neighbors began to stop by in the following days. Some apologized for doubting me. Others brought pies, casseroles, even flowers, like it was some kind of celebration. One woman hugged me and whispered, You gave us hope. If you can stand up to them, maybe we can too. That meant more to me than anything, because this victory wasn't just mine. It was a reminder that one voice, one fight, can ripple out and inspire others. I knew there was still work to do. The barns needed repairs, fences needed rebuilding, the soil needed care. But I wasn't afraid of the work. In fact, I looked forward to it. Every nail I hammered, every seed I planted, would be proof that we had taken back what was rightfully ours. As weeks passed, life began to feel normal again. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I was stronger, braver, and I knew, without a doubt, that I would never let anyone silence me again. One evening, standing on the porch of the farmhouse, I looked out across the fields. The sky was pink and gold, the air buzzing with crickets, and I whispered to myself, This is what justice looks like. This is what family looks like. And no judge, no rich man, no system will ever take it away again. I had walked through fire. I had faced humiliation, doubt, and fear, but I had come out the other side, not just with my land, but with my dignity, my pride, and my faith restored. This wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the start of a new chapter. One I would write myself. One where my family's story would live on, stronger than ever. And that's the truth.